Ladies, gentlemen, distinguished guests, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. My name is Desiriade Sivia, and it is my pleasure to be the Master of Ceremony for the first Island Summit on Climate Change. Today, it is the World Meteorological Day, so it is appropriate to discuss the future challenges presented by climate change in islands and the blue economy in the European Union. To begin this program, we are pleased to welcome two video messages from Mr. Christos Economou, Head of Unit at Sea Basin Strategies, Maritime Regional Cooperation and Maritime Security at DG Mare at European Commission, and Mr. Manuel Carmona Yebra, Policy Officer, Policy Development, Monitoring, European Commission.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning from Brussels. It is an honor for me to say a few words on behalf of the European Commission and more particularly DG Mare in this special day which concludes the Horizon 2020 Soil Impact project. I'm sure all of you gathered today understand the importance of the blue economy for your countries and regions. I'm talking about traditional sectors such as fishing, maritime transport and ports, tourism, but also the emerging ones, such as marine renewable energy and biopharmaceuticals. Developing these sectors in a sustainable way is a priority for DG Mare, not only because of the replies they offer to the challenges we face around climate change, but also because of their strong recovery potential in the context of the current sanitary crisis. The European Green Deal calls for a transformation of all economic components, and the maritime one is no exception. In the next few years, the imperative of decarbonization, zero pollution, circularity, and biodiversity will likely change the face of the maritime economy. Recently, the new EU strategy on adaptation to climate change pointed out the clear implications for maritime areas such as loss of biodiversity, ecosystem degradation, ocean acidification, and sea level rise. Islands are directly affected by climate change, and research and innovation, besides nature-based solutions, will be key elements to reduce risks and enhance the resilience of these territories. From DG Mare's side, we are now working on a Commission communication setting up a new approach for the blue economy, framing it in a truly sustainable manner from an environmental, economic, and social perspective. Last November, the Commission also published the EU strategy on offshore renewable energy to ensure that the energy of the oceans can be combined with the modern technologies and become a cornerstone for the clean energy transition in the EU and its climate targets. The Commission will also issue next month an update to the strategic guidelines for sustainable development of the EU aquaculture. This will provide a common vision for the sector, both from a sustainable and competitive perspective. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, territorial cooperation instruments, and particularly sea basin strategies and macro-regional strategies, such as the Atlantic Maritime Strategy, provide a suitable framework for concrete projects in coastal territories and islands facing common challenges such as those related to climate. I wish you all the best in your event today, and I'm very keen to see the follow-up to this project, and I'm encouraging you to continue this collective effort for developing sustainable blue economy and for reducing climate change effects. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Manuel Carmona, and I work for the Directorate General for Climate Action of the European Commission. In Europe, project 3 years later, we have more than 20 organizations, more than 12 islands covered by social impact. And this project is particularly important because it tackles climate risk in crucial sectors of the economy of these islands. The sectors of the blue economy: aquaculture, energy, transport, tourism. These are lifelines for these islands, and they do need to take into account the projections for the new climate that are coming and that are coming from scientists in particular. The results of social impact will be crucial for the implementation of the new EU adaptation strategy. As you probably know, the new EU adaptation strategy tries to have in Europe adaptation that is smart, that is more systemic, and that is also faster, that is implemented right away. Adaptation that is smarter means adaptation that makes use of results from research projects like social impact, also of the European Maritime Observation and Data Network, EMODNet, and the Copernicus data and others, Horizon 2020, in the future, Horizon Europe. All these elements have to come together and make it possible that decision makers take the right decisions in view of the climate projections. But adaptation not only has to be smarter, it has to be more systemic. It has to go through all the economic sectors, and it has to go through all levels of government. It has to have a reflection on macroeconomic policies, on fiscal policies. It has to embrace the co-benefits of nature-based solutions, of protecting biodiversity at the same time as we use nature to protect ourselves from the impacts of climate change. And it also has to be more local. It needs to consider the specific circumstances and vulnerabilities of EU islands. This is the case for social impact, for example. And finally, adaptation needs to be implemented faster. There is no time to waste, and social impact makes a point of linking business, science, policymaking, precisely the kind of urgent links and urgent cooperation that we will want to see as part of the implementation of the EU adaptation strategy. Adaptation is important business, it's an investment in the future, and it will tackle many of the challenges that we have in terms of health, environment, and climate change. Social impact contributes to this, and so do all the people that have been involved in social impact and this conference. So thank you to you all.
Thank you both for your messages. Next, we would like to welcome Mr. Thomas Visikas, Project Advisor for Life and Horizon 2020 programs for the Executive Agency for Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises.
Good morning and welcome also from my side to the final conference of our project, Social Impact. I'm the project advisor of Social Impact, working at the European Commission in the sector of IASME climate action. It is my pleasure to see this project successfully compiling its findings and organizing its final event, which happens to be the first European Island Summit on Climate Change. Islands, as my colleagues mentioned, are among the most vulnerable regions in Europe, facing high exposure to multiple hazards such as sea level rise, extreme weather events, and droughts. At the same time, they have low adaptive capacity due to their limited connection with the mainland, economic activities, connection with the grid, and relatively small population. Therefore, the scope of social impact, as the title says, to downscale climate impacts and improve socioeconomic evaluation of climate change is very pertinent to the current needs and challenges. The project was launched in 2017 with a budget of nearly 4.5 million euros. It was and still is an ambitious project with a large consortium that had to work with a broad spectrum of disciplines and stakeholders, a very wide geographical coverage, and several areas with different needs and associated risks. The project concludes this month, but we are looking forward to the legacy that it will leave behind and its key exploitable results. Blue, sustainable growth is very high in the European agenda, and the results of social impact can have valuable contributions there. One is sure, the good work done in social impact should not end with a project, and it must reach the audiences and the broad impacts that it aims at. One of the recent successes of our project was the inclusion at the Horizon Results platform of the European Commission, highlighting the importance of generating information in support of policymaking. Among others, the presented results include projected climate changes on hazard indicators until the end of the century and socioeconomic modeling of key sectors with projections on maritime transport, tourism, energy, and aquaculture. Soon, we will have the final review of the project with external experts, where we aim from our side as European Commission to find even more exploitable results and support the project through further exploitation routes. I would like now to leave more time for the real protagonists who can tell you more about the achievements of their work. I'm looking forward to the rest of the conference, and I wish you a productive day and fruitful discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Visikas. We shall now move on to hear the message from Mr. José Antonio Balbuena Alonso, Minister of Ecological Transition Fight Against Climate Change and Territorial Planning from the Government of the Canary Islands.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I would like to give you a great welcome from Canary Island government to the member of the project Social Impact. As you know, the climate change is so important for the future of the world, but is overall important for the future of the islands. The different studies that are about the climate change, the scale of it are not appropriate for the archipelagos. So we think from the Canary government that project like this is so important for us, and overall it's so important for the policymaker to can develop the correct rules and correct laws to the next generation. The information have to be scientific given. Is what we need to make good decisions for the policymaker. And for this, we have to accurate more lower scale for our results and for our investigations. Soil impact has this target. And for us, this target is so important. Nowadays, in Canary Island government, we are developing different rules and laws to put Canary Islands in the top of the regions in Spain which in the climate change fight. Study the different elements that affect the greenhouse emissions and the interaction between atmosphere and oceans is so important to the Canary Island government. Analyzing the track between the decarbonization adaptation policy and what are involved with the sociality of the economy is also important. Develop different methodologies that could give us different models that can where we can develop our different measure and our different lines in a correct way is also important. And overall, if soil clean plant could give us modern elements and modern tools that can help not only to Canary Island, but also to the rest of the archipelago of the UA. And I'm talking about Chipre, Malta, Fareham, Baleares, Sicilia, Cerdeña, Corsica, Creta, Azores, Madeira, Canarias, and Antillas. I think that it could be a so useful project for us. As you know, Canary Islands have 3 targets for the next 10 years. First of all, we have to achieve the climate island could be neutral points greenhouse emission in 2040. We also want to guarantee the life being in our islands. And overall, we want to be a reference point in the UA in climate change fight. So We're waiting for your conclusions, and I can promise you that each one of your conclusions could be considered in our policymaker in climate change actions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Balbuena. Now it is time to hear from Ms. Teresa Verástegui, Vice Minister of Tourism in the Canary Islands.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Teresa Verástegui, and I am Vice Minister of Tourism of the Canary Islands. Thank you for inviting me to this event, which represents the culmination of So Climate project and the first European Island Summit on climate change. World Meteorological Day is observed every year on March 23rd to highlight the importance of the role that people and their behavior play in protecting our atmosphere. So Climate project has been tourists adapt their views and attitudes when protection measures against the climate change are taken at the island destination. Some express positive sentiment toward the change imaging of the tourist side, while others are willing to pay to reward some initiatives. Overall, so Climate project has been turning point of view in the advice and information available to implement policies to help adaptation and mitigate the consequence of climate change on the island. Concerning the tourist sector, one of the project's main contributions has been studying how tourists react to the climate change and their growing concern about the impact of their activities on the destination they visit. Canary Islands are the first region in Europe in tourism in terms of overnight stays, but also aims to achieve leadership and sustainability and in the fight against the climate change. Canary Island on fostering mitigation and compensation and adaptation policies. Finally, I would like to end by congratulating the entire consortium for the magnificent work carried out. So Climate have the full support and commitment of the Vice Ministry, both in the involvement with the project results and the support for the following edition of the summit. Canary Island Declaration is the first step showing this commitment. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your words, Ms. Verástegui. Let's give the floor to Mr. Anil Markanya, Scientific Director at the Basque Center for Climate Change and Advisory Board member at Stock Impact.
Hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be with you. My role with Stock Impact has been relatively small. I've been an advisor on the outside of the project and have followed the progress that it has made over the 3 years since its inception. And it's a great pleasure to see now the project having come to fruition and to receive, to have a chance for people to reflect on the results. I think for a long time, in climate policy, adaptation has been, if you like, the poor cousin of climate policy. Much of the attention has been focused on mitigation, and adaptation has received relatively less attention. But for areas such as the islands and the Mediterranean, adaptation is critical. And it's also important, as one of the earlier speakers said, to take advantage of some of the opportunities created by climate change for these islands, so that they can both demonstrate the pathway to sustainability and take advantage of some of the assets they have in terms of both creating renewable energy, but also in creating pathways to better adaptation. The work has been done in great detail, and it's in many work packages, which I'm sure you are going to go through in some detail. One thing I would draw your attention to is that these the different impacts are interrelated. And that interrelationship is partly reflected through the modeling of the linkages through economic models, economic climate models. The results of those models are very important because they will show you how they will show policymakers how the different sectors come together and how changes in one sector can affect other sectors. So I hope that we will have a chance to see the way in which these deep dives that have taken place in analysis are going to be interrelated. The other thing then, perhaps, which I hope will come out of the meeting, the summit, is the key messages. Because there are lots of details, there are lots of great bits of information, but please let us try and see what is it that we can really tell the world that, as a result of this project, that are actions which should take priority and ways in which those actions can be implemented. Often with projects of the European Commission, the project kind of falters once it comes to an end, but I hope this is not the case here, because as we can see, many of the policymakers are involved, and I hope they will take the message on. So let me stop here and wish you well and say thank you for having me on board.
Thank you, Mr. Marcandia. We welcome now a message from Mr. Luis Serra, Rector at the University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria.
Good morning. I want to extend you a cordial greeting as a Rector of the University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria in this final conference of the Climate Impacts Project that evaluates the impact of climate change and the socioeconomic consequences on the blue economy in 12 European islands, and focus specifically in 4 sections, which is tourism, maritime transport, energy, and aquaculture. I want to congratulate you for the hard work during the last 40 months in this pioneering project research coordinated by our university, where 24 partners from 9 countries have been participating, with the largest budget today approved by our university in the projects of the Union 2020, Horizon 2020, from the European program. I wish all of you a very successful meeting in this pooling initiative between universities, public and private research institutes, public actors, and communication institutions. I wish all the best with my very best regards. Thank you.
We now go to a recorded video about the Impact project and its main outcomes, followed by words from the project coordinator, Mr. Carmelo Leon, who will explain the milestones and future challenges of this project.
Islands are particularly vulnerable to climate change, as it contributes to the progressing decline of their extraordinarily rich biodiversity. Thanks to the Horizon 2020 program offered by the European Commission, a consortium of 24 partners from 8 different countries, with University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria and Ramble as coordinators, have had the opportunity to create Impact. The project aims at modeling downscaled climate change effects and their socioeconomic impacts in 12 European islands and archipelagos until 2100, and assess corresponding adaptation pathways, thus complementing current available projections for Europe. Given the expertise of the project partners, Impact focuses on 4 sectors. These sectors are of great importance for the European islands. By implementing an expert-assisted process to identify and rank alternative adaptation pathways for the islands medium to long term, the project contributes to strengthening policy science interface and to promote blue growth of the European coastal and maritime industry. Over 40 months of intensive work, SoClimpact has faced multiple challenges due to its broad scope and to the lack of regional climate models or specific data on vulnerability and exposure at island level. One of the enduring observations has been the need for effective engagement of policymakers, as they are the ones who make possible an appropriate use of the project's outcomes. In a nutshell, thanks to the SoClimpact project, new dedicated simulations on hazard indicators at island level were performed for different time horizons and climate change scenarios. An iterative risk assessment was conducted, aiming to not only evaluate the risk of climate change and compare between islands, but also to monitor the vulnerability and exposure dimensions as they evolve with time and respond to human interventions. Changes to the 4 blue economy sectors were assessed, mirroring the changes in threat level from specific hazards. The socioeconomic implications of these changes were measured by applying 2 general equilibrium models. Alongside regional stakeholders, an assessment was conducted for alternative adaptation pathways. Each pathway is framed by the geographic, political, and socioeconomic conditions of each island, and so requires a collaborative effort to assess. But the most powerful service provided by SoClimpact is the Regional Exchange Information System and the Adaptation Support Tool for Islands. These allow stakeholders to access specific knowledge generated by the project and afford them the opportunity to intensively discuss ways forward, to propose new ideas for collaborative work, and to establish a benchmark for adaptation beyond island borders.
Good morning. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce you to the SoClimpact project that we have been conducting in the last 3.5 years. The objectives of this project, as you know, are looking at the future with present knowledge to get in depth about what are the spatial resolution projections of climate change science and information about economic impacts, and also bringing in the information about climate change impact change in order to improve the economic valuation of the impacts that climate change is having on island economies. All these for the economic modeling of climate impacts through the integrated and socioeconomic impact analysis to facilitate climate-related policy decision-making for blue growth in the islands, involving policymakers and stakeholders. It is well known that islands are very vulnerable to climate change, and climatic modeling was not available until we have this project on an island scale involving socioeconomic impacts. And most of the islands depend on blue economy sectors, and there are more than 2,000 islands across Europe which are inhabited, and impacts are expected to be important. Also, the blue economy sectors are also relevant in these economies. So that's why there's need to understand what's going on with these sectors in the island economies throughout Europe as an example for management climate change at a local scale in the islands economy that can help to understand those management issues across the globe in islands in other contexts and continents. So that's why we look at a sectorial approach involving different sectors in this blue economy of the islands. And on 12 different islands of the Azores, Balearic, Baltic, Canary Islands, Corsica, Crete, Cyprus, West Indies, Madeira, Malta, Sardinia, and Sicily. And the challenges we have had in this project have been related to the complexity that we are dealing with. A large geographical area covering 12 different islands in 9 different countries, and with 24 partners and more than 120 researchers that have to be bring together to produce different issues and information that are useful for the modeling of the impact chains and all the socioeconomic conditions of the islands in order to predict what's going on in the future. So this complex governance involved that we had to implement a structure of bodies that were needed for accomplishing tasks and the objectives that we have at hand, involving sectoral modeling teams, island focal points, task forces for normalization, weighting and aggregation in the different sectors that we are dealing with, and also with island reports and local working groups that are also involved in the governance of the project. So this is really a very interdisciplinary work that had requirements from different climate scientists and also economists and sociologists and environmental scientists. So the flow of work from the different working packages also was a great challenge, because integrating all these elements of information in order to produce useful and sound recipes for undertaking contributions in the fields of the interdisciplinary science. And lastly, but not least, the issue of communication and dissemination of the information to the stakeholders and to society. We are dealing with complex aspects of nature that needs to be boiled down to understanding of the people of society and all the people who take decisions in real world, and who have under pressure because of budget restraints and time restraints and all sorts of difficulties in order to implement and understand what's going on in the climate science. And this is also a great challenge for climate science that we have tried to deal in this project, and is a common problem for moving forward the issue of policy to undertake all the responsibilities that scientists have with society in terms of moving forward to solve all the problems that the environment is bringing to the well-being of the humans in this world. So the novelties that we have produced along all this work involves the availability of a wealth of information, which is downscaled to projects of climate change in different sectoral impacts and socioeconomic impacts in the European Union. And also we have worked very hard on the participatory policy design involving 12 regional organizations, stakeholders, academics, to develop accurate and adapted climate change projections for EU islands and to correlate the relationships between climate change scenarios, biophysical impacts, and island socioeconomic conditions. Involves different elements of climate that have to be downscaled. The project addressed the lack of high resolution data by expanding the Met-Cordes database and the size of unpublished atmosphere ocean couples simulations. This involves models of climate that have been coupled with information and medium-term horizons that can be expected these changes to be happening. So we have developed an iterative risk assessment methodology for assessing risks and monitor the vulnerability and exposure. Risk is conceptualized and the interplay of vulnerability and exposure and hazards that together through a number of indicators which are interrelated in the different sectors produce what we call we have denominated the different impact chains with 12 different 226 indicators in 17 different impact chains in the sectors of blue economy. So this is an achievement that is linked to the economic valuation of the potential impacts for the blue economy sectors, taking into account specific hazards and risks, utilizing the skill choice experiments and value transfer techniques. These techniques are conducted at the place of the individual, trying to ascertain how individuals take decisions in the face of climate change in the island's economies. And also, another of the achievements is related to the macro modeling, the socioeconomic impacts coming from the changes in temperature, sea level rise, and precipitation rates that are expected to affect consumption, tourism flows, and infrastructure have been used as inputs in these macro models involving 14 sectors of economic activity with impacts on GDP, consumption, investment, and employment. The assessments of these impacts in terms of GDP are quite substantial, and they indicate what is going to be these impacts in the island's economy and what we can avoid if we undertake anticipatory policy measures of adaptation in these islands' economies in the precise time that is needed. So this is major achievements that are related to the design of the policies involving the stakeholders with the co-assessment and ranking with the local stakeholders of alternative pathways that are framed by the geographical and socioeconomic conditions of each island and the future climate change scenarios. So this is very important in the conceptualization of the project, because all the information, all the climate information, economic, socioeconomic indicators, more than 120 indicators coming through the climate change impacts definition are put together for the individuals in society, the stakeholders, for them to design in a participatory way all these adaptation policies that should be or need to be implemented in the foreseeable future in order to reduce those impacts that are expected by the models, the economic models. So this is major achievements that we have obtained, that we have reached in the project. And we can also go forward with these achievements in terms of putting them in what we think it is a tool for designing policy in the future, which is the regional exchange information system and the adaptation support tool for the islands that allows stakeholders to access a specific knowledge generated by the project and the opportunity to discuss intensively new ideas for collaborative work and establish a reference point of adaptation. So this exchange network brings solutions in support of climate change management in islands and autonomous regions and incorporate actions that and methodologies. So it's a library of different solutions that can be put together by different stakeholders, policymakers, sector rulers, and practitioners interacting and propose new ideas of collaboration and engagement. So the RAINS platform aims to facilitate networking, not only in support of regional adaptation policy design, but also to promote the mainstreaming of the adaptation outcomes developed by the project into EU climate change policy instruments, such as the EU Adaptation Strategy. Offers a huge opportunity for all islands of the European Union to intensively discuss and establish a benchmark for adaptation and resilient capacities of EU islands and blue groves. So these are important tools that are useful for policy design, but we face important challenges. We have to act now. We cannot stay static about what is coming on based on all this information. We have to anticipate and reduce and avoid the net cost of climate change in island environments, societies, and economies. All these GDP losses, employment, consumption, investment, what is going on, all this structural change that has been anticipated by the macro models has to be managed through the appropriate adaptation policies. All these risks has to be reduced. So we have to design and implement adaptation policies to continue in this process. So we need common solutions to common problems. New islands and regions of Europe can also be analyzed and to fight against climate change because islands are very, very vulnerable, as we know, because of climate change. So there is need of research and innovation and development of scientific knowledge that must be supported by the appropriate funding. And this is what is in this declaration we are putting forward today, and we bring to you for your approval. And we thank very much to the policy makers and the policy leadership in supporting this initiative, so that the project can become something useful for society, and so that science and knowledge is something that can be put ready to solve problems. Because we have to develop the human capital for employment and development, innovative solutions for blue economy sectors, as we have found out and implementing in the development of the adaptation policies through the stakeholders' participatory processes. There is need to work through the 5 capitals that society has endowed: the financial capital, the human capital, the social capital, the natural and physical capital. All together have to be developed in order to come out with useful and important solutions. So what is next? What is the major challenges that we are facing in the near future? We need to continue with this process of open innovation to become sustained, because islands are very small, tiny territories across Europe and across the world, and they need to be empowered in order to claim the needs and the facilities that will enable them to undertake potential solutions to reduce those costs that climate change is going to impose on their societies. So we need to build a permanent platform, this kind of platform that avoids to the generate of these impacts in climate change that will bring in all these island communities in these islands for the foreseeable future. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much to all of you for collaborating and participating in the project and to make it a success. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Leon. SOC Impact started with the preparation phase, in which climate-related impact chains were defined, followed by a second phase where downscale projections of climate change impacts for the 12 islands case studies were performed. Now it is time to present the next lot on our agenda, dedicated to outline the main results of the project in the words of the work package leaders. Starting with Mr. Guillain Dubois from Ramble in France and Mr. Gianmaria Sanino from Enea in Italy.
My name is Guillain Dubois. I work for Rumble, and I was the co-coordinator of the SOC Impact project together with Carmelo Leon and the leader of WP3. WP3 was a conceptual framework work package for SOC Impact. It defined the main method used by the project. First, we had to set the boundaries, the sectoral boundaries, on which sector, for which islands, and on which priority impacts of climate change did we want to work on during the project lifetime. And then based on this scoping phase, we relied on impact chains. Impact chains are conceptual diagrams which explain the causal links behind a given consequences of climate change. For example, what are the risks of productivity loss in aquaculture farms due to changes in marine environment, in changes in sea surface temperature, for example? Or what are the risks of losing attractiveness in destinations, in tourism destinations, due to a change in forest fires, intensity and frequency? So these conceptual diagrams were defined by research teams, and they were then submitted to local stakeholders in local working groups and validated, and we did several iterations. The local teams also developed some very specific impact chains. For example, in Azores, there was a very specific issue. The tourism economy relies partly on whale watching, and stakeholders were interested if in the future the conditions for whale watching, the environmental conditions for whale watching would change in the future due to changes in marine environments. And that was the result. And based on that, the subsequent work packages of the project could look for indicators, look for data, and then model these complex impact chains until an assessment of the economic consequences of climate change for island economy. So finally, I would like to ask a few questions to the stakeholders and to decision makers present in our summit. First is, do you know enough about the current and future consequences of climate change for your impacts, for your islands, sorry. Second, how would you like the methods for climate risk assessments to be improved? And third, what are the priority impacts of climate change that you would like future research to consider for the future of your islands? Thank you very much.
Work Package 4 has produced new climate data, atlases, and reports aiming to illustrate how climate-related hazards and impacts that are relevant for the four economic sector and the island considered in social impact will change in the future. The climate-related hazard taken into account consideration in WP4 are sea level rise, forest fire, extreme weather events, rising temperature, increased energy demand, and droughts. WP4, through the sector modeling teams, has gathered data from already existing databases and local stakeholders to also quantify the exposure and the vulnerability components of risk, and elaborated methods to normalize and weight all components into risk indicators per island and per sector. The risk scale is divided in 5 different values, ranging from very low to very high. Let me give you just a few examples. For the maritime transports, among all the islands considered in social impact, actually is not expected to exceed medium risk score, even under the worst case climate scenario. That is what we call the business as usual climate scenarios. For aquaculture, the main impact of climate change is expected to be associated to the warming of seawater, and as a secondary effect, the wave power. And what about energy supply? Well, we have explored actually the renewable energy, in particular wind energy and photovoltaic energy. For the future, what we have seen is that there will be a general decrease in productivity for the wind energy and the photovoltaic energy. The reduction is around 5%. This is just an average values all over all the islands, with maximum decrease of about 10% for some specific islands. All the islands analyzed in social impact, Malta appears to be in a critical position. This is mainly due to its very small size compared to the other islands, the large population density, and intensive economic activities that give rise to comparatively higher exposure and vulnerability. In general, it was observed that the higher risk correspond to higher exposure and vulnerability, or lower adaptive capacity, rather than higher hazard. If you want to know more about the work of WP4, you are welcome to look at our website, where you can find all dedicated documents that are available for every islands analyzed in social impact. Thank you.
A crucial step of the project was the Work Package 5. In this package, partners implemented several methods for market and non-market valuation of climate change impacts. The economic projections for the 4 specific blue economy sectors were subsequently used as inputs in Work Package 6, the macroeconomic modeling. With this complete picture of future changes, Work Package 7 did its work, assessing alternative adaptation pathways with regional stakeholders in each island needed to build more resilient archipelagos. But let's see what the leaders of Work Package 5, 6, and 7 have to say. We will start with Mr. Carmelo León and Mr. Matias Gonzalez from the University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria in Spain, and Mr. Miguel Ángel Gardner from the University of the Castilla-La Mancha, also in Spain. Afterwards, we will hear from Ms. Zoe Brontisi from E3 Modeling IC in Greece, to finish with Mr. Hugo Costa from the Faculty of Science in Portugal.
Climate change is going to have important impacts in the economic sectors that are studied in the project, agriculture, energy, marine transportation, and tourism. And in this working package, in Working Package 5, what we do is to assess the economic impacts of these physical impacts that have been identified in the analysis and evaluation of the impact chains of the different sectors in the island economies. We do this using a blended methodology approach. First, we utilize transfer analysis in which we scan the literature on these sectors, trying to find out what other scholars and other empirical work have produced on the impacts that have already been identified in the impact chain modeling. And these values are put in order to be utilized for the macroeconomic impact assessment that is conducted on Work Package 6. We also utilize big data analysis and empirical application in which observations from social network data is utilized in order to find out how people change the behavior when there are climatic changes such as heat waves or forest fires across the destinations. And another area in which we utilize a different methodology is the utilization of discrete choice experiments or stated preference analysis, in which tourists are asked about their choices of different alternative destinations based on different climate change parameters, and we find that people are very sensitive to some of the attributes which are going to be changed by climate change, such as infectious diseases or forest fires, or the changes in the marine ecosystems, together with the worst comfort of climate, higher temperature levels, and so on. Also, these values that we find for tourism change across the different destinations. Some of the islands, such as Cyprus or the Canary Islands, have higher impacts than other islands across the Atlantic and the Mediterranean areas. So these are important impacts that have to be taken into account by the policy makers and for the adaptation policies, and also are included in the modeling approach for the macroeconomic models that are conducted in Work Package 6.
It is widely known that climate change raises important threats to ports' operativeness. In Social Impact Project, we have studied for different emission scenarios the most relevant climate change hazards that threat ports, as well as the cost of the most effective adaptive actions to preserve ports' operativeness in the European islands. For the case of the Mediterranean and the Atlantic islands, projections shed relatively stable maximum wave height and maximum wind speed along the 21st century. Yet, expected sea level rise ranks from 40 to 90 centimeters, even 1 meter, which would enable highest waves to exceed current dikes height and flood docks and storage areas, thus affecting not just to trade operations, but also to tourist and non-tourist maritime navigation and potentially strangling the island's economy. Cost of adaptation action has been approached taking the cost of heightening and reinforcing the set of vulnerable structures per physical unit taken from literature and the length of surface of structures potentially affected taken from experts' information. Thus, we have estimated that, for instance, Malta authorities should invest around €450 to adapt Marsalot port, or that Crete regional government should invest around 200 million to adapt Heraklion port. Both cases for the most pessimistic scenario of emissions. So we have done the same for the set of the main ports of the European islands.
Thank you for inviting me to present the results regarding climate change impacts on the energy sector. Rising average temperatures and more frequent and intense heat waves are a clear driver of increased energy demand to meet higher cooling needs. The energy demand for water desalination depends on drought conditions. Droughts are affected not only by precipitation reductions, but also by higher temperatures that cause more evapotranspiration. In the assessment of future energy demand due to cooling and water desalination needs, we have used two opposed emission scenarios, RCP 2.6, which corresponds to strong mitigation measures, and RCP 8.5, which considers increasing emissions throughout the century. While the high emission scenario would cause a strong energy demand increase for cooling and desalination needs, under the mitigation scenario, the energy demand would increase much less and would even stabilize during the second half of the century. The higher cooling and desalination needs could cause higher electricity prices, but this will depend on the adaptation measures taken. The climate and energy strategy of the European Union includes energy efficiency measures to control energy demand increases. The widespread use of thermal insulation in buildings could decidedly cut cooling needs. In the case of desalination, measures like the reduction of water leakages can compensate in part the increased energy demand for this need. Regarding the energy supply side, the share of renewable energy should increase strongly under the climate and energy plans of the European Union. Climate change impacts on wind and solar photovoltaic potential will be rather small in general, which represents an important guarantee of energy supply from these sources. In shock impact, we have also examined the so-called renewable energy drafts, which are low energy production periods. Following our results, the frequency of energy drafts is much higher for wind than for solar photovoltaic energy. Therefore, more solar than wind energy capacity should be installed in order to ensure a stable supply and reduce the need for backup sources and energy storage. Both energy sources are also complementary in time, and solar photovoltaic productivity shows a summer maximum that matches well the increased cooling energy demand in summer. Due to the limitations of available land surface in the islands, offshore renewables should have a fundamental role. Offshore wind energy has a much higher productivity potential and is less variable than onshore wind energy. In shock impact, we have also assessed the option of offshore floating photovoltaics, which is receiving an increasing attention as it offers a potential solution for taking advantage of the positive characteristics of solar energy, also in places where land surface is limited. Many thanks for your attention.
In Work Package 6 of Social Impact Project, we assess the macroeconomic implications of climate change on the islands, focusing particularly on the blue growth sectors. We conduct our analysis with two different modeling frameworks, a CGE model, GEMI3 Island, and a macroeconometric model, GeneForce. We confirm with our analysis that climate impacts negatively affect the economic growth of the islands. And we find that under both climatic scenarios, losses are significant. In particular, GDP losses can reach 3% in 2050 and 6% in 2100 at a 2-degree scenario, indicating that even under a 2-degree climatic pathway, there are GDP losses for the islands, while results show that these GDP losses double or more than double under a no mitigation scenario. And in particular, they can reach 6% in 2050 and more than 14% in 2100. Now, results vary by island. The scale of losses varies by island, and we find that the Canary Islands show the highest impacts, while Malta the lowest losses. And key drivers for this range of results across the different islands are the geographic remoteness of the islands and the economic diversification of the island. These two formulate the economic vulnerability of the islands to climate impacts. On a sectoral level, we see that tourism is one of the most important sectors. Its activity is highly affected by climate change, and since this sector is one of the largest employers, islands with a high share of tourism in value added show the most detrimental effects and many job losses. Now, another finding is that increased electricity demand due to desalination and cooling requirements brings higher electricity prices and lower disposable income for other types of goods and services, which lowers overall the activity of the islands. We find that adaptation measures are important in order to be able to mitigate these negative effects of climate change and address the challenges. So a key question is, what are the measures and the policies that can be taken in order to avoid job losses, particularly in the tourism sector? And how can we avoid the increasing electricity prices that have detrimental effects to the welfare of the households? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hugo Costa from Faculty of Science in Lisbon. We lead the Work Package 7 in Social Impact. In Work Package 7, we developed adaptation pathways for each of the island case studies throughout a dedicated framework to aquaculture, energy, maritime transport, and tourism. This framework was based in climate change risk assessment, using impact chains and a socioeconomic layer for each of the islands. We developed a participatory process that were completely adapted to the COVID pandemic context. In this context, we were forced to adjust the project and develop and developed an online tool to collect the stakeholders' contributes in each of the islands. Together with the island focal points, we developed an online survey tool based on climate, socioeconomic, and also climate policy context. We aim to constitute a portfolio of adaptation options to respond to climate change risk. We connect adaptation science to local decisions throughout 4 adaptation policy trajectories, which were created in 3 different periods of time until the end of the century. Within this structure, policy pathways were designed to adapt the islands to the future climate. The participation process involved more than 120 stakeholders, which throughout the online survey tool performed 70,000 individual choices to define the pathways for each of the regions. Those adaptation pathways and the adaptation options considered were also evaluated. Based on a simple decision model, we developed with the island focal points partners a common pathway for islands. The structural body of these pathways are based in policy options like for tourism, maintaining the mainstream of disaster risk management, or conduct the adaptive management of natural habitats. For maritime transport, we are able to highlight the need of integration of ports in the urban tissue and the development of background routes and infrastructures for extreme events. It was also important for the stakeholders, the improvement of the operational speed of the ports. For energy, the availability of storage systems and the creation of green jobs were valued. For aquaculture, the existence of integrated multi-trophical strategies and submersible cages were considered good adaptation options to implement. To finalize this video, I would like to launch 2 questions to trigger the discussions around policy design. What is the most critical information for decision-making in adaptation to climate change? Is the resolution and quality of the models? Is the quality of the socioeconomic information? Or is the access of good adaptation options with costs and benefits and balances? The other questions I would like to launch is related with the future of the citizen participation in climate change policy. What do you think is an active and relevant participation in climate change process? Thank you for your attention.
From the tourism sector, we have 4 video messages from Mr. Francisco Santos Jara, Regional Advisor, Economic Recovery and Livelihoods for Asia Pacific at United Nations Development Programme. From Mr. Eduardo Santander, Executive Director at European Travel Commission and Co-Chair at Global Future Council on Sustainable Tourism and World Economic Forum. Followed by Mr. Tim Fairhurst, Secretary General at European Tourism Association. And finally, we will hear the message from Mr. Alejandro Cardenete Flores, Deputy Minister of Tourism in Andalusia.
It is an honor to be here with you today at the first European Islands Summit on Climate Change, although we increasingly talk about climate emergency, as islands have all but time. With unpredictable weather patterns, sea level rise, droughts, and floods, the world's most vulnerable populations are facing increasing risks and limited opportunities to avoid poverty traps. For the United Nations Development Programme, adaptation to climate change means supporting more resilient, sustainable development outcomes that take into consideration ongoing and future climate-related impacts. Our community-driven approach includes integrated climate change strategies, ecosystems-based adaptation initiatives, food security, water resource and coastal management, climate information and early warning systems, and building climate-resilient energy and infrastructure designed for the 21st century. In all our activities, we encourage the protection of human rights and empowerment of women, minorities, and the poorest and most vulnerable, through partnerships with multiple stakeholders from national and subnational governments, civil society, as well as academia and the private sector. UNDP has a specific programmatic offer for small islands development states, which I believe is relevant to this forum. SEEDS and European islands, while distinct, all share a set of common social, economic, and environmental characteristics, making them a unique case for sustainable development. In fact, many islands around the world are pioneering the blue economy paradigm that promotes sustainable use of ocean resources while generating economic growth, jobs, and social and financial inclusion, and preserving and restoring ocean ecosystems. As a catalyst for these efforts, islands are accelerating digital transformation and developing innovative solutions in response to the challenges created by climate change and the impact of COVID-19. In a World Tourism Organization UNDP report on SDGs, tourism was recognized as a vital contributor to economic growth, environmental protection, and poverty alleviation. Indeed, a well-designed and managed tourism can help preserve the natural and cultural heritage assets upon which it depends, empower host communities, generate trade opportunities, and foster peace and intercultural understanding. It is with this in mind that UNDP has established a strategic partnership with Universidad de Las Palmas TIDES Institute to help governments to advance towards a more sustainable, inclusive, and risk and climate change-informed sector. We aim at continue exploring potential collaborations to respond to the complex challenges islands face vis-a-vis the climate emergency. Many thanks for this opportunity. Muchas gracias.
My name is Eduardo Santander. I'm the Executive Director of the European Travel Commission. Our organization is a unique association in the travel sector, representing the national tourism organizations of the countries of Europe, and our mission is to strengthen the sustainable development of Europe as a tourist destination. The European Travel Commission serves as a DMO for Destination Europe, by joining its members' forces and by implementing its own program of work. Our members, 33 national tourism organizations, promote and manage the tourism offers of the European countries. ETC is also chairing the European Tourism Manifesto, an alliance of tourism stakeholders in Brussels. What are our plans with regards to climate change issues? Tourism is, of course, a contributor to climate change, and the sector also depends on reliable weather patterns and environmental infrastructures. At ETC, we believe that carbon reduction should be embedded in a more holistic view of sustainable development of the tourism sector that could make it more resilient and eliminate some of the current problems like the so-called over-tourism. ETC has already included some concrete measures in our own activity to combat climate change and encourage sustainable tourism. Our latest publication is a new handbook on sustainable tourism implementation, which is an ultimate roadmap for European NTOs and DMOs on how to tackle every step on a journey towards sustainable transformation. It is a tried and tested process that will guide destinations through challenges of sustainable transition, providing best practices, top tips, checklists, templates, and other useful tools. We are investigating also possibilities of measuring the carbon footprint of tourism in the destinations, capitalizing on already existing solutions like the Malta Register. We're also working on a pilot project that provides intelligence based on a combination of satellite Earth observation data, environmental data, and open data sources to derive environmental impact indicators for the collection, comparison, and monitoring of sustainable tourism indicator STIs, as you know, in the ETC members countries. Lastly, The success of our promotional activities has historically been defined as a growth in visitors' numbers. This perspective is outdated. The current DTC marketing strategy, Horizon 2022, focuses not only on building a distinctive image of Europe as a travel destination in long-haul markets, but also on securing regional dispersion and creating sustainable growth. We're also in the process of agreeing on a new set of KPIs that aim for and reflect a balance between visitors' numbers and value created for the travelers as well as for the destination. Last but not least, I would like to wish you all the best for this event and the best wishes for the project in the future, and obviously the full support of ETC in your endeavors. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Tim Fairhurst and I'm Secretary General at the European Tourism Association. Thank you very much for inviting me to say a few words at your conference. Excellent hub for good practice sharing throughout the industry in order to help people measure their impact and transition to a much more sustainable form of practice. We must work towards science-based targets. There is no option. While the ecosystem across Europe needs financial help to get back on its feet, strategically, climate is the biggest challenge we face, and the work you are doing for all of Europe's islands from the Atlantic to the Eastern Mediterranean is essential. We need to work together. This is an area where collaboration must come before competition. Private sector must work with the public sector, and we need to develop systems that will provide jobs and sustainable employment for the indefinite future, not only in tourism, but in all the other socioeconomic aspects that our communities depend on. Your islands are precious, your marine environment is precious, and the very fragile ecosystems on land also are precious. Your work will look after those for future generations of visitors. Thank you for all you're doing, and good luck with your discussions.
Hello from Andalusia. I am Manuel Alejandro Cardenete, Deputy Minister of Regional Tourism in Andalusia. First of all, congratulations for this final meeting of this project, so Impact, for this first conference of climate change in Canary Island. Here in our government, we are so clear that the climate change is one of our goals. In fact, in the President's, we have one climate change office, and in our Ministry in Tourism, we have two main lines where we are working in this goal. First of all, in our strategic plan for 2021-2027, we have included the climate change in one of these goals. And we have been the responsible of the opinion in the Committee of the Regions, including the climate change in the opinion so-called tourism, sustainable tourism. In fact, in the European Commission, as you probably know, the Green Deal, this main goal, including climate change, is one of the objectives of the European Commission, and we have included in our opinion about the future of the tourism. After the COVID-19, we are going to have a new tourism, and we have so clear to include in every part of this goal the climate change and the possibility to avoid any problem related with the decarbonization, etc. So again, congratulations and have a nice conference.
It is time now to hear from Mr. Francesco Cate from CPRM Islands Commission, with whom we had encouraging meetings and look forward to future collaborations together, followed by Mr. Isidro Gonzalez, Deputy Secretary of the Union of the Mediterranean, who is going to share the adaptation plan concerning the blue economy and the promotion of energy transition, as well as interest in soft impact.
The Conference of Peripheral Maritime Regions, the CPMR, brings together more than 150 regions from 24 states from the European Union and beyond. It works for a balanced development of the European territories and to ensure that the needs and interests of its member regions are taken into account in policies having a high territorial impact, such as cohesion policy, maritime, transport, and of course climate and energy. The CPMI is a unique organization having a general secretariat representing the united voice of its 150 members and being then subdivided into 6 geographical commissions based on the European sea basins such as the North Sea, the Baltic Sea and also islands, allowing for a tailor-made approach, for example, to the specific needs and challenges of island regions. The CPMI fights for climate and energy policies that promote social and economic cohesion and that have a territorial approach, that is, that involve regions and their communities into policy making and ensures that tools and solutions are based on the strengths, needs and geographical specificities of the regions. The CPMI has launched the Regions Act initiative in order to show via an interactive map what its member regions are already doing to contribute to the European Green Deal objectives via their adaptation, mitigation strategies, use of cohesion funds, and also to show what are the vulnerabilities of their territories. The initiative has also shown how regions are indispensable partners to reach a climate-neutral Europe, and how they are a key level of governance to ensure that urban and also peripheral areas can be part of the ecological transition. The SoCleanPact project is a great example on how tailor-made solutions are needed for island regions, and the results of the project can provide for a great input in their decision-making in fighting climate change and adapting to it. And we look forward to working together.
Hello, I am Isidro Gonzalez, Deputy Secretary General of the Union for the Mediterranean. Born, by the way, in an island near Las Palmas de Gran Canaria, exactly in Tenerife. I'm very grateful for your invitation for this final conference on the SoCleanPact project. Last year we published a report by the MEDEC Association of Scientists on the impacts of climate change, especially in the Mediterranean region. We found out that the impact of climate change in the Mediterranean is the second worst in the world, only after the Arctic. Temperature has risen in the Mediterranean area 1.5 degrees in the last century, and unless we react swiftly and urgently, the temperature will go up to 2 more degrees at the end of this century. So this makes us put to work efficiently and to continue implementing many projects. And recently, the 2nd of February, we celebrated the second Union for the Mediterranean Ministerial on Blue Economy. Important decisions were approved by our 42 member countries on blue economy and the blue economy sectors such as tourism, fisheries, maritime navigation, etc. Concerning the specific cases of islands which are isolated territories and have to face specific threats, challenges and opportunities, we also aim at that ministerial declaration to continue the transition to a carbon neutral circular economy and to foster the use of renewable energies such as the wind farms or the sea wind farms, for instance, which could be implemented and where the islands are in a very good, in a very special position. Regarding tourism, we implemented agreements on enhancing sustainable coastal tourism. It's important for the tourists not only to go visit our countries, but for them to come back. And for them to come back, they had to find in good conditions, not only health conditions, but also environmental conditions in the coastal areas. They need to find clean beaches. So this is important also, that we go for a sustainable tourism in the coast, and that the jobs created in this tourism area also are familiar with these new concepts. Concerning the project that you are closing in this conference today, SoCleanPact, we are looking forward that it will be further capitalized and transferred to other non-European Union islands also. there you can count with the help of the Union for the Mediterranean to help you in this implementation in other non-European Union islands, as I say. We at the Union for the Mediterranean, we are 27 European Union members and 15 non-European Union members. So in these 15 non-European Union members who belong to the Union for the Mediterranean, you can count on our support for the implementation of this project. Thank you, and I hope you will have fruitful discussions during today's session. Thank you.
Now it is time to hear from Mr. Jan Cornel from the Clean Energy for EU Island Secretariat. We had the opportunity to exchange information with this Secretariat, and a cross-communication action plan was outlined for mutual benefit. And we are happy to say that this collaboration will be extended after the project ends. We also have recorded messages from Ms. Uli La, with whom we counted on as a researcher during this project, and is now head of the Socioeconomic International Renewable Energy Agency at IRENA, which makes her a perfect ambassador for the energy sector. And from Mr. Javier Ojeda, from the Spanish Professional Aquaculture Association, APROMAD, who had a high implication in this project due to his great expertise in the analysis and ranking of adaptation measures for the aquaculture sector.
Hi, I'm Jan Corneli, Head of Strategy and Policy at 3E, and we are coordinating the new Clean Energy for EU Island Secretariat. The new Clean Energy for EU Island Secretariat is built on solid European foundation. In 2016, the Declaration of Valletta was signed, the European Parliament allocated the budget, the European Commission referred to the Secretariat in its Green Deal communication, and in the summer of 2020, the Member States came together around the Memorandum of Split, which gave a solid backing for the clean energy for EU islands. We have in this second phase of the Secretariat some very concrete objectives. We want to reach half of the island communities. We want to sign up 100 islands for the Clean Energy Transition Pledge, and we want to technically assist 40 islands in their clean energy for EU island projects. And we are doing that based on a methodology called Explore, Shape and Act. We want to assist islands in whatever phase of the clean energy transition they are, whether they are starting to engage stakeholders around a common agenda, whether they are looking to shape up concrete clean energy transition projects, or whether they have already established projects for which they are looking for finance. We can assist them in whatever phase of the clean energy transition they are, and the whole team of the Clean Energy for EU Island Secretariat is there to help. Our team consists of a solid and complementary team of consortium partners. We at 3E are coordinating the Secretariat and are leading the technical assistance, and for that we have assistance of RDA, a Climate Finance Solution advisor, Rescoop for the capacity building. We are working with ThinkE and Eclairion on the regulatory analysis, and we are working with Steinbeis for the communication and events, and with DNVGL for the digital infrastructure. And with this team, a very complementary and motivated team, we are there to assist the islands in the clean energy transition, to support their experiences, and also to be their advocate in Brussels to show what the islands are capable of in terms of clean energy transition.
Good afternoon, everybody. At least here in the UAE, it is already afternoon. Congratulations to finalizing this very ambitious project. In the following, I will briefly outline IRENA's work on the role of renewable energy in climate change adaptation, a role that is often overlooked. You have addressed a wide range of risks in your project, such as extreme winds and temperatures, droughts, beach reduction, or forest fires and seagrass loss. Though renewables can do a lot, they cannot really contribute to adaptation to all these risks, but to some. The easiest application coming to mind is adaptation to heat waves by powering air conditioners with PV. The electricity demand profile for air conditioning, particularly in non-residential purpose, such as schools, universities, or offices, matches the electricity generation profile of PV well. No need for cooling at night, most needed around noon, most needed in summer or on sunny days. However, AC increases heat stress in cities, be it powered by PV, any other renewable energy technology, or by fossil fuels. Solar thermal cooling can provide a better option here. Regarding droughts, solar pumping provides a climate-friendly solution to irrigation and is in many areas the more economic solution, as opposed to diesel-driven gensets, for instance. Also, as you found in your study, desalination needs increase from lack of precipitation and from increasing temperature. Despite existing promising applications, solar desalination is not the prevailing technology. Adapting to strong winds requires either a very strong infrastructure or a very flexible one. Off-grid solutions make for a versatile adaptation measure here. Household-level foldable solar panels, for instance, can cover basic needs and serve as backup capacity in case of power outs in the aftermath of storms. IRENA suggests including the use of renewable energy for adaptation explicitly in the next round of updating the NDCs. And with this, I wish you all the best, a nice meeting, and a fruitful continuation of the Social Impact family. Thank you.
Fish farmers in Spain and also in Europe have for a long time been concerned on the impacts of climate change on this sector that is called to be key in food security strategies at European and country levels. In this regard, our efforts focus on monitoring climate hazards, placing great relevance on the vulnerability vectors and developing adaptation and mitigation plans. Climate change impacts on aquaculture in many ways, by exposing sea pens to greater waves and more frequent extreme weather conditions, by exposing cage-grown species to a wide range of disease vectors, by reducing the availability of conventional raw materials for fish feeds and making them more expensive, by provoking an increase of toxic algae blooms, or by degrading marine habitats and by impoverishing biodiversity. Coping with these issues requires specific knowledge and expertise in aquaculture management, which in turn contributes to take better and more informed decisions. For this reason, it is of crucial importance that the sector, public administrations and science work together. That's why we have attended with interest the call from the Social Impact project to provide our experience on the climate change impacts and our perspectives on the best policies and paths to deal with it. I sincerely believe that the Social Impact project results will contribute to stakeholders in aquaculture adopting better positions on this very relevant issue for the future of this sector, but also for food security in Europe.
We will now have a short break, ladies and gentlemen, and we will see you in 10 minutes. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. At this point of the presentation, we would like to acknowledge the fact that even though some of the islands cannot be part of the virtual set as it was originally planned due to COVID-19, we thank you for the effort you have made in these difficult times to participate in this event from different locations. But let's carry on with the event by giving the floor to our panelists and stakeholders who will explain the case studies of their islands. We start with a set of consecutive participations from 6 islands in alphabetical order. Let's welcome Azores, Balearic Islands, Femar, Canary Islands, Corsica, and Crete. After introducing themselves and explaining the organization's involvement in this project, they will have 2 minutes to explain the following topics. How useful can this project's information be to promote best practices in the islands? And what actions are being implemented or promoted by you to ensure the correct use of the project's knowledge? Please, we need you to stay within the 2-minute slot. Thank you in advance.
Thank you. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Go on.
Hello, my name is Catarina Furtado. I'm from the Azores. First of all, let me thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity to share our experience with you. Regarding the so-called Climate Pact project and our involvement in it, in the Azores, we were very interested in this project, and so we had, I would say, a relatively active participation on it, as the theme of climate change is of the most importance to us. In September 2018, we participated in a first face-to-face meeting where we collected contributions from the various stakeholders. In September 2020, we participated in an online meeting with the aim of collecting contributions to the construction of the adaptation options in the Azores. We responded to an online survey questionnaire from the blue economic sectors: tourism, aquaculture, energy, and maritime transport. And in October 2020, we participated in a second online meeting to present the Azores adaptation pathways and to discuss the results. About the information generated by the project and its usefulness to promote good practices to combat climate changes in the Azores, we believe that the results of the project for the Azores were limited and had low confidence due to the low participation of stakeholders, since the methodology was based on their opinion and participation. A greater participation would definitely increase the confidence of the results and allow a better perception of the needs of each island of the Azores. There was a gap in the existence of regionalized and precise climate projections, and it's relevant to find and use adapted models that will take into account our geographical situation and our climate reality that are in some ways very distinct from the other archipelagos. In general, the climate change adaptation options were presented are related to the information of the Azores Regional Climate Change Program, PRAC. In this sense, overall, it is considered that this project did not add relevant information on adaptation to climate change in the Azores in relation to the information that already exists in our regional program. In the Azores, the implementation of the Regional Climate Change Program approved in 2019 is underway. It is a sectoral special planning program that covers mitigation and adaptation action to climate change aspects in the region. Still, the So-Climate Pact project concludes that future adaptation policies should provide or make room for different solutions in relation to the different islands of the archipelago. So, although the adaptation measures of the Azores Regional Climate Change Program are defined at regional level, we will surely take that into account, making way for the implementation of different options based on the needs of the various islands. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Azores. Can we hear from Balearic Islands, please?
Glad to be here. I'm meeting again the old friends. My name is Gabriel Jordan from the University of the Balearic Islands and the Spanish Institute of Oceanography. And our role in the project was at the beginning to interact with different stakeholders to understand what were their main concerns regarding the climate change problem. And what we learned is that they think that a main concern is what will be the impacts of climate change on tourism, which is one of the topics of social impact. And in particular, we identified three main threats, like the heat stress, like the beach reduction, and the water quality, because the tourism comes to our island looking for pristine waters and nice beaches and so on. So what the problem is that they need accurate and very local information about the evolution of those parameters. So we developed new methodologies to produce accurate projections of beach evolution. And we applied those methodologies to the Balearic Islands to find out that really the beaches in the Balearic Islands and in general in the Mediterranean are under threat because we expect large reductions in most of the beaches, which in normal conditions will be greatly reduced, and under stormy conditions, most of them will disappear in the most pessimistic scenario. Also, another thing we've done is to evaluate the evolution of seagrasses. Seagrasses are the main foundation species that allow to have a lot of biodiversity in the coastal ecosystems and to increase the water quality. So we developed the projections of how the seagrasses will evolve because of the warming of the sea. So we've been able to deliver all this information to the stakeholders in the islands so they can start their adaptation plans very soon. Thank you.
Firma, can we have your intervention, please?
Yes. Good morning to everybody. My name is Damian Arikas. I'm working as an expert for climate change and sustainable mobility at the Baltic Environmental Forum in Hamburg. And we were with the Social Impact project working on the island Fehmarn, which is the third biggest island of Germany in the Baltic Sea. And as Fehmarn is the only northern European island in the Social Impact project, it was to some extent a little special, our role that we played, because it is the only northern European island, as I said, but also the tourism on our island is mostly domestic. That means mostly German tourists visit Fehmarn. But this trend is growing. Actually, people are more and more like visiting destinations in Germany or in Northern Europe. Climate change in this regard is partly seen as a positive thing from some tourist managers and people that are active in the blue economy, because like the season is getting longer and the weather is getting warmer, and this is positively impacting the numbers of overnight stays, especially now in the Corona crisis, where people tend to spend their holidays in their own countries. There are still no official adaptations plans on island level in Germany. Adaptation plans that exist are on federal state level. So there's still a lot of work to do. But I must say that Social Impact did initialize a very important debate on the island, on Fehmarn Island, about adaptation, about climate adaptation. This debate did not exist before. And so we brought some very good discussions to our key stakeholders, had very interesting debates. And we can also say that knowledge, scientific knowledge, was brought to the island by the project, even though it was not always easy to make this knowledge transfer, to bridge these scientific information to the stakeholders that are very much practitioners on the island. Also, like political processes are not, it's not enough like to have just a general model or some scientific things that say how politicians should address problems, because there are many impacts for political decisions in play. So we made a first step there to initialize this adaptation discussion, but there's a lot of work that has to follow. Thank you.
Canary Islands, can we have
So
words?
good World Meteorological Day to everyone. My name is Gonzalo Piernavieja. I'm representing the Canary Islands Institute of Technology. It's a technology center with quite big, with more than 200 persons belonging to the regional government of the Canary Islands, and carrying out an important activity in fields related to sustainable development, particularly renewable energies, which has been the main subject in Social Impact, sustainable water technologies, circular economy, or blue economy. So our renewable energy department has been working for more than 20 years with other insular regions in Europe in finding solutions for a clean energy transition of these territories, which is a big challenge, and also to help decarbonize the economies of the islands. Here in the Canary Islands, there are several relevant initiatives going on, boosted by the regional government. The regional minister in the inaugural session depicted several of them. So at the beginning of the term, there was a climatic emergency declaration, and this has triggered several initiatives, legislative packages. Currently, there is a strategic plan for climate action. There is a climate change law being passed quite soon. And then there is also regarding decarbonization, which is the main contribution of ITC in Social Impact. The cornerstone is the energy transition plan, which aims the full decarbonization of the Canary Islands in 2040. It's a quite ambitious challenge. So in this sense, ITC acts both as a contributor in Social Impact in different kinds of renewable energy solutions for the energy transition, and also as a consultant to the regional government in this energy transition plan. So all this energy transition plan consists of several strategies, and we are in the half of the way, because we have to deliver it by the end of the year. And so in summary, the Canary Islands are on the move and are making important steps in the ecological transition. Thank you.
It's time now for Corsica.
Good morning. My name is Guylain Dubois. I'm in charge of the climate change team at Rumble, and I was island focal point of Corsica in the Social Impact project. I'm talking to you actually from Marseille in mainland France, because our islands are more and more difficult to access with the COVID crisis, and there are more islands than ever. But still, it's important to, we are all in islands, like currently in Europe, actually. Corsica combines climate change vulnerability of coastal areas, and it has some of the most pristine coastal areas in the Mediterranean, sometimes more than 50 kilometers without a single house, but also the vulnerability of mountainous areas, which is something special. What we learned from Social Impact, there was a good participation of stakeholders, which before are asking for knowledge, before being capable to act, before being capable to adapt to climate change. We need to know better what might happen in our islands. We need to understand how the climate will change in the future, which is beginning. It's a start, but it's very often it's not enough done. We need to know what are the priority risks for our islands. For example, Corsica is very vulnerable to very dependent on tourism, and we need a hierarchization of risks so as to be able to take decisions. So I think that's one of the main outputs of the project, what it brought us. And then so Climpact also probably contributed to raise awareness in local decision makers, together with other initiatives, to somehow the project building capacity on climate change and its impact and on the needs of adaptation. And there are some initiatives ongoing at regional level, a regional climate change adaptation plan, which is triggered by the national strategy, and local authorities have obligations to adapt in France and therefore in Corsica as well. And hopefully, so Climpact has been one step towards this direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Corsica. Can we have your introduction, please, Crete?
Dear organizers, dear guests, thank you very much for inviting me to represent Crete to this very interesting conference. I am George Alexakis, the Vice Governor of Crete in charge of European and International Affairs, and the Vice President of the CPMR, the Conference of Peripheral and Maritime Regions of Europe. Crete has been very actively participating in the activities of the project. We have hosted the General Assembly in Crete at 2019 by having the pleasure to welcome all the partners of the project. We have also organized several regional workshops. Crete has been able to deliver specific benefits and to meet new opportunities, especially through the extensive regional surveys conducted at Crete Island, as we have also collected useful database information for the project results, for the regional services and for the citizens. And because we have been able to engage local stakeholders of the Quadruple Helix, we have been also able to analyze different scenarios and effects for the tourism, the constructions, the recreational activities, the transport, and etc. The most significant opportunity for our island was the links with the Crete Regional Plan for Adaptation on Climatic Change and corresponding strategy study of environmental impacts. In specifics, first by systematization and improvement of the decision-making process, short-term and long-term decisions related to the adoption and their implementation in the activities at Crete. Second, by linking adoption to promoting a sustainable development model. Third, by promoting adoption actions and policies in all sectors of the economy. Fourth, by establishing a mechanism for monitoring, evaluating, and updating actions and adoption policies. And finally, by information and society awareness. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Each island will also have a minute to answer a question from the audience, which you can post in the chat box of this platform, and I will channel these questions, time permitting, to our panel. Please stay within the time slot. So we have the first question for Azores. Azores, what is the most critical information for decision-making in adaptation to climate change? Is it the quality of resolution of the climate models, the quality of the socio-economic information, or do you think it's a good cost-benefit balance of adaptation measures?
Thank you very much for the question. I would say that for us, we have some difficulty in having models that are adapted to our reality. The Azores have very different contexts that other regions have. So the models that were used have to be adapted to the region. So that is for us the most critical. You can't hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. So I would say that's the most critical issue that we had regarding this project. So we had some good conclusions from the project, but we would say that it's not adapted to our region. So that's an issue for us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. For the Canary Islands and Corsica, how can we avoid the increase in electricity prices affecting the welfare detrimental of households?
So, decarbonization, I mean the energy transition based on renewable energies, is both technologically challenging tasks, but also a capital-intensive task. So, in the short term, it will need high investments in many sectors, in adding generation, but also in storage. So particularly, this is an island issue, storage. In this sense, in Europe, member states, which have the competences of fixing the prices, they have to support islands in order to accelerate this transition. So this is a very relevant issue. But in the medium term, there are lots of advantages. The first one is the reduction of the vulnerability of the islands in energy aspects, the independence of fossil fuels, and also on the fluctuations of these prices of the oil prices. So this will not be a problem anymore. And then, as a consequence of the increasingly introduction of renewable energies, subsequently a reduction of the electricity prices. So first, capital intensive activity, but in the medium term, significant reduction of the electricity bill.
Thank you.
Concerning Corsica is quite late in the development of renewable energies, I would say, compared to Europe, the rest of Europe, and maybe compared also to other islands. So it's highly dependent on fossil fuels. So its first challenge is to start this very strong transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And this is already a challenge, some financial barriers. Of course, we need investment, but there are also some legal barriers. When you are to develop offshore windmills, you have to take into account fishermen. For example, when you are to develop onshore windmills, you have to take into account landscapes, and they are really very beautiful in Corsica. And this would be a very strong challenge to reach a very high share of renewable in the future and to bridge this situation where we are quite late. And then Circle Impact showed us that climate will change and we will need to become more robust in front of climate change. This new energy mix dominated by renewables will need to be less dependent on climate fluctuations. We will need to assess the main risk and the vulnerabilities of this new energy system. And there are some strong innovation needed, and we will benefit from what is done in other islands.
Thank you, Corsica. Creech and Firmer, these are your questions. What is the most critical information for decision-making in adaptation to climate change? The quality of resolution of the climate models, the quality of the socioeconomic information, or is it a good cost-benefit balance of adaptation measures?
Thank you for the question. It's a very important question. I believe that the third one is the most critical information. The access of good adaptation options with cost and benefits in balance. And let me explain why. Adaptation policy and decision making needs significant level of research and information to be supported. Either tool sets for adaptation planning, results of projects and case studies, together with information on adaptation actions at all administrative levels, the local, the regional, the national, the European, the global one. For many decades, scientists have been collecting data on climate. As more data points are collected, they increase the accuracy of existing climatic models with extremely precise information and resolution in quality. Besides, the socioeconomic information has been an important factor added the last years into the model calculations. Nevertheless, the analysis of the cost and benefits of adaptation plays an important role. However, it is difficult to estimate the future impacts and economic cost of climatic change due to the wide range of potential risk, the scientific and economic information available, data gaps and modeling constraints. These issues are amplified when considering adaptation costs and benefits, thus making the access of good adaptation options with cost and benefit imbalance the most critical. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, the most critical information for decision making in adaptation was the question, and this is not easy answered, I think, because it is not just a matter of the resolution of climate models or socioeconomic models. Of course, these models can help to guide decisions, but there are some more influences that policymaking is facing. So, for example, money, budget, elections, coalitions, just to name a few. There are so many influences that have to be balanced in politics and in decision making. And of course, models can help to balance, can help to gain more information about future developments, but they are only a small part to decision making. And also, the assessment of balanced adaptation measures is a very important point, but still not all impacts can be influenced on municipal level, on island level. So, like giving information to the island level does have a good, can have a good impact, but it cannot cannot guarantee good decision making. Also, in politics, usually certain things like the usual short-term thinking are playing a key role. We have legislatory periods. Politicians are there in office for a few years, so they tend not to make very costly decisions that are like maybe having good impacts on the future, but not helping them in their today's policies. So these factors have to be taken into account. Knowledge is good, but it's not everything in politics. Thank you.
Thank you. For Balearic Islands, we have the following question. Can a dedicated program be foreseen and funded in the context of current and future climate studies to reduce uncertainties and better respond to local issues?
Yeah, our experience working on the Balearic Islands and other islands of the Mediterranean is that it's of paramount importance to have high-resolution simulations and produce high-resolution projections of hazards. So a major problem for the peripheral islands is that those simulations are not available because they are not a major interest on producing them. So it is possible to have them. We know how to do it, but there are some economic constraints, and our opinion is that it's important to have a dedicated program focusing on these peripheral regions. That will be costly because we'll need simulations for each island because they are very separated apart, but it's feasible and it's really a need. So probably Europe should think about launching a program for those very specific regions.
Thank you, Paliaris. To follow suit, let's hear now from the representatives of Cyprus, Madeira, Malta, Sardinia, Sicily, and West Indies, who will also have 2 minutes to explain the same topics. How useful can this project's information be to promote best practices in the islands? And what actions are being implemented or promoted by you to ensure the correct use of the project's knowledge? Cyprus, can we start with you, please?
Hello, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, I should say. My name is Konstantinos Stylianou from Interfusion Services, and we have been the island focal point for Cyprus. My colleagues, Haris Neofitou and Yannis Konaris, and I were involved in different tasks of the project, like the creation and operationalization of impact chains for the tourism sector, providing data for the modeling of socioeconomic impacts, and of course, engaging with stakeholders for ranking and mapping of the adaptation pathways. The project results, the information that has been generated, and the format of this information will be very crucial for promoting best practices, whether it's from an environmental or economic or societal aspect. Obviously, for Cyprus, tourism is of great significance, so stakeholders were very much looking for the results of the climatic and the socioeconomic modeling that helped greatly identify the threats and where we stand as an island regarding beach reduction, forest fires, thermal comfort, and everything that has to do with tourism. Our first aim is to push forward and facilitate the collaboration of both local and across-island policymakers. So for that reason, we have planned ways to grow our network of stakeholders from both the public and the private sector, obviously taking advantage of the regional exchange information system and the adaptation support tool. We will be able to bring together partners for working in future research and development projects to continue not only carrying out the research, but spreading the results too. And also we've started looking at programs especially catered to promote social awareness and public engagement, so we can get the public more involved in the various issues surrounding climate change. Thanks.
Hello, good morning. I'm Filipe Oliveira from REM, that is the Regional Agency for Energy and Environment of Madeira. And we were the island focal point in this project for Madeira. And REM participated in the impact chain and also in the local data collection. And we established a connection with stakeholders. We involved around 60 stakeholders, including local authorities, companies, and other institutions. And we organized these stakeholders, having 2 working sessions with them to discuss the climate projections and also the adaptation measures and a survey tool related with these matters. Concerning the results of this project, I would like to point out that one of the main was to have the active participation of more than 60 local stakeholders. Was an important discussion. Of course, this is a new subject, and it's important to have many stakeholders of different sectors active participating on these discussions. We also identify that for the Atlantic islands, the models are not accurate because these islands are in the limit of the range of these climate change models, and it is necessary to have a downscale on these climate models for the Atlantic islands to support decision making and also to support the allocation of resources for the adaptation in these islands. We also found that there is a lack of information that is necessary to collect about climate change and also socioeconomic. Well, we were involving the local authorities, and we hope that these measures that were developed in this project will be used in the adaptation and the strategies for adaptation in Madeira region. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeira.
Good afternoon. My name is Lina Schenke. I'm a marine environmental consultant at Aquabiotech Group, which is an independent company based in Malta. And we're mainly involved in aquaculture research and development, as well as consultancy and engineering of aquaculture systems. Within the Cyprus project, we were the island focal point for Malta, and we're also the co-chair for the sector modeling team of aquaculture. In Malta, we've identified the best practices as the development of action plans and strategies to adapt to climate change impacts. So Malta has the advantage of being an island state, which facilitates the development of strategies focused specifically on the island. Strategies like these must be based on scientific findings in order to be tailored to the local conditions. And the Cyprus project provided scientific results in the form of data, for example, for the modeled hazard data, methodologies such as the risk assessment concepts, as well as direct assessments within the different blue economy sectors. During the project, Aquabiotech was involved in a variety of activities to ensure the use of the project's knowledge, for example, stakeholder meetings. And now after the project, besides all the project outcome, Aquabiotech is preparing a project summary specifically for Malta to be provided for the stakeholders and to draw local policymakers' attention to the project results. Additionally, we are hosting a capacity building workshop today in the afternoon to discuss with local stakeholders the opportunities and possibilities for future projects to collaborate and to continue the work on climate change assessments in Malta. Thank you.
Thank you, Malta. Sardinia, can we have your intervention, please?
Yes, hi, good afternoon. My name is Alessandro Mancoso. I'm a policy expert for ANCI Sardinia, and together with Laura Fotis, who is an environmental engineer and the European project expert, we have been the island focal points for Sardinia on behalf of ANCI Sardinia. As for what we have learned from Social Impact, we believe that the results of the project activities with a view to making the research results functional to the life of our communities and functional to the territorial development will be useful to create profitable alliances between the public administration and the private sector above all, and can also be useful elements to share at the local, regional and national level to give a bottom-up approach to policies to combat and adapt to climate change. The number of stakeholders that we have involved around the project has allowed us to highlight the possible and best actions most desirable for Sardinia to address the problems related to climate change. These preferences represent a hard core of knowledge which ANCI Sardinia will use to draw up future proposals aimed at developing policies at the local and regional level for adaptation to climate change on the island. Furthermore, one of the missions of ANCI Sardinia will be precisely to continue with the further research actions related to climate change by capitalizing on the results of the Social Impact project. Just one word regarding ANCI. ANCI Sardinia represents 277 municipalities around the island and has among its functions that of promoting and encouraging initiative to spread knowledge of local institutions, civic education of citizens, and to encourage the participation in the life of local autonomies. And ultimately studies and promotes initiatives aimed at favoring the economic and social development of communities, also in order to implement environmental protection policies, starting from the active involvement of individuals. Beyond that, ANCI works to develop participatory emergency planning models in the municipalities of the island, which are implemented through socio-anthropological research on the perception of hydraulic and hydrogeological risk, through the facilitation of participatory processes, the definition and implementation of communication actions, the implementation of awareness-raising activities on hydrogeological and flood risk management plans. We are committing to proposing to the National Association of Minor Island Municipalities, whose acronym is ANCHIM, and it belongs to the ANCHI circuit, to build a political manifesto that represents a roadmap, including the best practices that we have developed through the social impact, to be proposed to local administrators so that they can include them into the political agenda with the aim of promoting virtuous behavior within the 4 sectors considered by social impact. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, Jason.
Your turn, Sicily.
Good morning, islands from Sicily, the biggest islands of Mediterranean. And we are a big island, and also we have 18 islands, so Sicily Islands, I can say. My name is Giovanni Ruggieri, and I'm president of the Observatory of Tourism for Islands Economy. We studied European and worldwide islands. And also I teach tourism economics at Palermo University. And as OTA, me and also Patricia Calò, she's our researchers, we are an islands focal point of the project for Sicily Islands, and also technical partner. Well, what can we do to promote best practices? This is the question. Well, we started to create a group of local experts that discuss on this, and they promote new best practices. And also from the best practices for the projects, for your other islands colleagues, we try to diffuse, to implement in the Sicily Islands. The very important things that we try to export through islands, the way to fight against climate change impacts. And why OTA? Why us? Because we work on tourism, and in Sicily we have 5 million of inhabitants, and we have double or 3 times of tourists along the year. So the impact of tourism and the future tourism, we hope more, and also the impact of this inhabitants, of course, will increase, are very important for the climate change. What can we do practically? We started to link with the Chamber of Commerce network. So try to push enterprises to adopt the results of the social impact projects. We would like to push all enterprises to adopt and to modify. And also they are very interested in social impact results, because they need to save money, to reduce costs in the future for this impact. Another very important things, we work with institutions. We have 390 municipalities in Sicily, and so we work together with rules, with a special agency for Sicily for the environment, and working together to adopt the best measures for the climate change. And it's important that we are working for the future, for the next 20 years, 30 years. This is very important. And at least, and I finish, we work in the strategic plan of the islands and also marketing plan of the islands. So we will put all this research results in this plan, so to be adopted at the level of single municipalities of a group of municipalities. Don't forget that we have two active volcanoes that, like Etna and Stromboli, will contribute in the last past year to totally change, the environmental and also other aspects. Thank you.
Thank you. West Indies, it's your turn.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Narcisse Zaibo from the Université des Antilles. So the West Indies are represented by Guadeloupe and Martinique in the Lesser Antilles arc. And the two islands are in the east border of the Caribbean. And the specificities of these islands are not the same of the other European Union islands. So this project is led by two laboratories of the Université des Antilles, one in Martinique and one in Guadeloupe. And during this project, we worked transversally with all the work packages. So our first meeting with stakeholders and socio-economic actors was to identify their needs in terms of impact of climate change on the blue economy sectors, and to see how this project, the social impact project, can bring them the best answers and the best practices. So the usefulness of this project for us has been to respond to the concerns of the professionals of tourism and also to the professionals of the sea regarding the impact of climate hazard and the consequences of climate change on this hazard and also on the marine environment. So as we were, before this project, before this social impact project, we were already working on related European projects in the field of climate change. So we were able to provide climate data by 2100 horizon. We provided climate data working with the scenario RCP 8.5 about the sea level rise, cyclonic anomalies, wave heights, marine submersion, temperature, etc. So we'll discuss in the question. So the key actions for us result from the survey we made with the tourists, and after that, the relevant issue for us is that the leisure activities related to the sea represent the most important part of the attractiveness of tourism in our both islands. So the main observation is that marine ecosystems are severely degraded for reasons amplified by climate change, intense hurricane, seawater temperature, coral mortality, beach reduction, erosion of reef barrier, algal proliferation, etc., etc. So the main action we took, so we will precise this main action. So I have to say that we work in collaboration with stakeholders, policymakers, etc., to try to find the adaptation measure in order to preserve the marine ecosystem and to make it more resilient. So thank you very much, and we will detail this action in the question.
Thank you, Cindy. For Cyprus and Sicily, this is your question. And please, ladies and gentlemen, we really need you to stay within the 1 minute slot. Thank you in advance. What are the main challenges you see for urban islands regarding climate change? We'll start with you, Cyprus.
Thanks for that question. It's strange because compared to our continental counterparts, islands generally don't produce as much of the harmful greenhouse gases that are fueling climate change. So islands are the ones least responsible for the problem, but unfortunately, they're also the ones most affected by climate change. So to begin with, I think the first challenge is to get all nations, especially industrialized ones that generate most of these harmful gases, to understand that they have a moral responsibility to act. But this also gives islands the opportunity to become forerunners and innovators in the battle against climate change. And perhaps this would allow them to align their actions with their sustainability development goals. Another challenge involves adaptation, like how can we accelerate the implementation of adaptation actions? And how can we offer support for policy development at all levels in order to have cross-scale and cross-domain coordination? I mean, the cost, the effectiveness, the benefits, the efficiency, and all the technical barriers vary for each type of response. So the challenge is to identify which actions can yield the best synergies and help achieve several objectives at once. But also we have to take into consideration the trade-offs between short-term and long-term effects and the trade-offs between our environmental goals and our economic objectives. And I think the most pressing challenge now at this time is probably how to integrate climate policies in COVID-19 economic recovery packages. It's important to take advantage of the pandemic, harsh as it sounds, because compared to our continental counterparts, we islands have a more fragile ecosystem. We are more isolated, we lack economies of scale, we don't have so much resilience as, let's say, mainland Europe. So the challenge is to avoid simply getting back to normal and instead aim for proper green recovery schemes and packages that promote environmental sustainability, that have positive socioeconomic and job impacts, and that improve our climate resilience. Thank you.
Thank you. Sicily, can we have your answer?
Yes. The main challenges for Sicily, it's coming from the social impact project. The first is an increase of temperature. That it means, the city islands compare with the rural areas. The second is higher humidity. Higher humidity is very important because the consequences are on the health of people. The other challenge is the reduction of the maritime flora, for example, Posidonia and the others, connected with, for example, with the increase of nautical tourism and other aspects. Another challenge will be the energy, the increase of general energy required for post-mobility. And the third, the last, is rethinking the human activities. And in this way, for example, in transport, for example, in tourism, and at the end, as Sicily, we have, and Italy first, there are some special, programs in the future to reduce the impact of mobility, like, for example, use of electric scooters. We have a lot in our cities, or free to use, or car sharing, or, for example, eco bonus or sisma bonus that help people that lives in islands to adapt for the future climate change challenges.
Thank you. Madeira, this is your question. What are the measures of the policies that can be taken in order to avoid job losses, particularly in the tourism and agriculture sector? Within a minute, please, if you may.
Thank you. Well, there is, of course, many measures related with climate change that can also be an important, can be important also for COVID. I would say that it's important to work on the resilience of the islands. And for that is very important to have a diversification of the economy and also to reduce the dependence from abroad. And on this aspect, I will say that the high dependence on tourism is very problematic because it depends a lot of many factors. And it's a high risk to have a high dependence on tourism. So it's necessary to think on diversifying the activities. Also inside the tourism activity, it's necessary to diversify the products. And related with aquaculture, it's very important to increase the local consumption of agriculture production. Because this is also important to reduce the dependence from abroad on food and to increase food security. Of course, all of these have to be done in the best sustainable way. And for that, it's important to have training on green jobs and also to help the companies to create green jobs and to support them. Thank you.
You. Malta, this is your question. Will the project summary be available for public services staff to review?
If the project summary will be available for obviously all the summary, all the outcomes of the project that have been produced will be available for the whole island. But additionally, yes, we're producing a project summary that's specifically made for Malta, and that has a good overview over all the results. And this is also something that we're going to discuss today in the afternoon in the capacity building workshop, where we are going to present all the results of the project with our local stakeholders and also with policymakers of the island, of course. So yes, we are happy to share all these results with our stakeholders. Thank you.
Malta. West Indies. What is the most critical information for decision making in adaptation to climate change? Is it the quality of resolution of the climate models? Is it the quality of the socioeconomic information? Or do you think it's a good cost-benefit balance of adaptation measures?
Well, thank you. So for us, the most key action resulting from this project is the creation of a professional license, which will be opened in 2022, so next year, in the University of Antilles. And the license is about the jobs of sea. This is the most relevant action because the challenge now is to, at the short terms, is the ecological restoration, the protection of the beach, the protection of the coastal area. So it is now important to train students and professionals in the job of sea oriented towards the specialties of ecological engineering and the sea, and on the coast. So before the Soc Impact project, as I said, we were working on parallel project, European project in the field of climate change, and the quality of the project was that for the first time we made the climate change models centered on the Caribbean. So we were able to identify our small little islands in this climate change model. And so we were able to bring with a very high resolution answer on the sea level rise, cyclonic anomalies, and wave heights, etc., etc. I think one question is missing.
No, actually, we need to move on in the agenda. Sorry about this. So I would like to thank all of you for that very important information that you have shared with the audience. Thank you so much. So at this point on the agenda, we would like to share a video of a possible climate change scenario for the end of the century in the tourist destination of Maspalomas in Gran Canaria. The Maspalomas sand dunes were declared a natural reserve in 1994. It is formed by a large area of approximately 404 hectares, with a large field of dunes, a lagoon, and a palm grove, making the whole site a great interest in terms of landscape, morphology, ecology, and wildlife, which is unique in the Canaries. It is surrounded by a belt of plant life, which serves as a refuge and nesting place for wildlife, and it is a stopping point for migrant birds on the way to the African continent. This video proposes a look at the evolution of the most important risks to which visitors to this micro-destination will be exposed and contemplates a setting of high emission scenario based on the results of the Cyprus project regarding the evolution of coastlines, forests, fires, marine biodiversity, rainfall, and droughts. This video is available on Cyclimpact YouTube channel to be viewed on 3D.
Tourism is the main economic driver in the Canary Islands, as they currently stand as one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world. Its peaks and troughs directly reflect in the lives and pockets of the inhabitants of this archipelago. Today we will explore various sites around Gran Canaria and understand how climate change has been proven to be a threat to the island and its long-lasting touristic interest. We find ourselves directly north from Maspalomas, high up in the mountains of Fataga. From this vantage point we can observe a treeless rural environment exposed to high temperatures. As time goes by, more and more days in every year will reach an extreme thermal sensation due to climate change. We've traveled forward in time to the year 2100, and now the average temperature is too hot to be comfortable out in the open. Hotter days will not be the only result of climate change in Gran Canaria. The warmer the water, the more ice caps will melt, and the further it will advance inland, swamping and reducing the beach surface available. It is expected that by 2100, a significant portion of the sand has been lost. Also, the increasingly frequent heat spikes on the sea surface throughout the years could bring death to local phanerogram meadows, resulting in the impoverishment of coastal biodiversity and the loss of both water transparency and its overall touristic attractiveness. Dense populations of phanerograms are one of the most productive ways of fighting climate change since they act as an efficient carbon sink. The prevention of regular heat spikes is critical, or else these foundation species of seagrass will die, contributing to the reduction of water transparency and precluding underwater touristic activity. Getting lost in time and trekking through a pine or a laurel forest in Gran Canaria is an activity certain tourists travel exclusively to take part in. Not long ago, in 2019, various reported wildfires consumed parts of this natural Canarian and therefore European heritage. The impact of climate change in this scenario results in an increased risk and more devastating fire events due to longer droughts or more frequent heat waves, destroying an otherwise vast and rich touristic rural landscape. The frequency of yearly precipitations is expected to be reduced. Extreme drought will occur for longer durations, and when it finally rains, it will probably become torrential. These heavy episodes can develop into floods, resulting in damaging infrastructure if the destination is not equipped with appropriate prevention measures in their urban touristic planification. The more often extreme climate episodes occur due to climate change, the more energy and water consumption will be required by the island inhabitants and tourists in order to maintain their thermal comfort. Clean and sustainable energy generation is the first step towards a future in which all the dangers and impacts mentioned are reduced to a minimum thanks to an early transition to a neutral carbon society.
What we have just seen in this video is a small sample of the information provided by this project. Projections for the 12 islands case studies are part of the service of the RAISE platform. Through its Adaptations support tool, it also proposes alternative adaptation pathways that are framed by the geographic, economic, and social context of each island and is a result of stakeholders' consultation process carried out in these islands. Besides that, the RAISE platform offers an opportunity for islands to exchange best practices and proposes new ideas of joint work between experts and local stakeholders. But let's see a video explaining the scope of the Regional Exchange Information System and how it works.
Exchange Information System, RICE, is an open and multidisciplinary platform for islands in which stakeholders, policymakers, practitioners, industry from local to national level can interact and propose new ideas of collaborative work and engagement activities with a scientific community that has been focused for years on the study of climate change impacts at island level, and from different research fields. This gained experience makes them able to provide data and solutions for coastal zones and all islands worldwide. Expert groups can be formed by filtering islands, sector of expertise and research field, or by considering only one criteria. Through the networking area, new discussion topics can be created on any subject of interest. It can be used to make invitations, look for partners in new project initiatives, propose consultancy services, request more information and data, amongst others. Once the topic is created, a direct message among the users and experts selected is enabled through an internal system. From that moment on, a private forum will show up, where selected members are able to participate in the thread, upload documents, and organize virtual meetings. But the most powerful service provided by the RICE is the Adaptation support tool for islands. It allows stakeholders to access specific knowledge generated by SOCL Impact project. The tool aims to be a practical guide presenting the current climate and related risks of each island, the existing national plans and strategies for climate change adaptation and mitigation, specific limits and obstacles that have been identified in the avenue of fighting against climate change. New knowledge stemming from the downscaled analysis of the different climate hazards, including not only the evolution of physical impacts, but also their socio-economic implications for the island's economy. And finally, it proposes a set of alternative adaptation measures that have been ratified by local stakeholders as appropriate interventions to face climate challenges and build more resilient territories. A direct access to other climate services and tools have also been included, such as the European Climate Adaptation Platform that supports the development or improvement of adaptation strategies. A manual of islands' best practices is also presented as support material for climate action. This document presents certain successful and promising actions that could be a way forward for the rest of the islands.
We now close this first Island Summit on climate change with Soc-Impact Future and Declaration of the Canary Islands presented by Mr. Marcelo Mautone, Soc-Impact Project Manager, followed by a short message from Mr. Carmelo Leon, Project Coordinator.
Yes, thank you, Desi. Dear colleagues, advisors, authorities, representatives, friends. So climate is what we measure in the last 30 years, but every year it was the last warmest in the planet, which particularly affect the islands. So what we measured and share in Soc-Impact in these 3 years evidences the need to continue working and interacting for common solutions for islands. So from Canary Island, that Soc-Impact Project Manager, and having had the honor and responsibility for this first time at the University of Las Palmas to coordinate an European project, we endorse the words of our Ecological Transition Minister, Mr. Balbuena, to trend to neutral emission islands and to be a reference point for the European islands. So the joint statement that we are going to present is starting point, is for what the next few years should come, and here are our principles and commitments. So as we see, right, okay, now we can see it. So we said that this declaration, right, is intended to lead the pathway for adaptation and collaborative work and governance for the archipelagos, right? So the main issue is our ecosystem fragility, right? And so let's pass to our principle. Please, next. Okay, so we say that we are unique ecosystems, and of course, that's a big opportunity in terms of blue economy also, right? Europe Islands, we are recognizing the new strategy of adaptation of climate change by Europe, right? That we are particularly regions and outermost regions that should be more vulnerable to climate change. And of course, the knowledge transfer programs are imperative tools, right? Including solution, procedures, behaviors, policies, etc., right? Not all European countries have sufficient capacity to address climate change by themselves. So it happens mostly in the outermost regions, as Soc-Impact has detected. So adaptation solutions for island territories have the potential to contribute also to the European adaptation policies, complementing the existing approach, right? So that's an important issue that we'd like to raise. And it was also declared in the new strategy, new EU strategy for adaptation to climate change, right? But we also said that the EU-specific approach is important to technically and financially assist, right, to most vulnerable islands and archipelagos, right, while encouraging national commitments and contributions, of course. That's our side, our part, right? Funding is needed for adaptation and mitigation in Iceland and require large investments to significantly reduce the dependence of the exterior on fossil fuels or food, right? So we have differentiation, responsibility, right? And we need to this financial assist for most vulnerable islands, and of course in the national contribution framework, right? Next. But also we recognize incentives and penalties that should guide our national and local actions, right? Respecting, of course, the regional conditions and singularities, right? But it's part of our rights and duties, right? So our commitments will be, as first commitment, we said that we try to build a network of European Iceland for climate actions, right, which address the common challenges, right, of knowledge, research, development, innovation, right, and national and European responsibility, right, and social participation and awareness, right. That's the first commitment. Then to promote an open access information, right, as we try to address in social impact, right, fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, right, information. That's very important for us as researchers. Right, next. Then participation engagement, of course, to enhance the participatory bottom-up approach, right, beyond the project. So engaging policymakers, stakeholders, public audience, right, in a multi-level collaborative governance for Iceland, right? That's our RAISE platform also, right? Then support and formulate new laws and regulations. So you know this is the social agreement, right? Laws and regulations. So precaution and prevention, general principle, for example, right? Trying to keep our singularities, and of course, another commitment is to monitor and report from climate change programs, right? Projects, initiatives, etc. Right? We have to measure, we have to monitor what is happening in our islands in order to support this decision-making process and adaptation and mitigation policies, right? And at least the social impact expert panel, as individual or institution capacities, will discuss on these common challenges, active funding, search for horizontal cooperation projects between Iceland and researchers' mobilities within the European Union. So that's our commitments. So that's all the participants from Social Impact and open to the general public too. Okay, so thank you very much for all of you.
Thank you, Marcelo. It's for me a great pleasure to finish this conference after this encouraging declaration with some minor remarks to take away from this gathering and our thought process, which has led us up to here. The objectives of this conference is not just to present results, but to move forward, as you have seen, with a declaration which is backed by policymakers and decision makers. We understand that knowledge and information lead policy designs and solutions, so we need a commitment. And this commitment, how could it come about? We have to blend science with society in order to stimulate leadership. Leadership needs to be based on science, on reflection, on knowledge, which comes from information, from data, from real science that is applied to real circumstances as the ones we are analyzing in the islands that we have studied in this project. We have tried to make useful science, shed light on the future, on 2100, which is now not so far away. So it's here, this problem. We have to influence policymakers to take actions. Actually, the key message is that climate change impacts both natural assets across society and have impacts which are relevant on islands and need to be studied so that the benefits can be taken into account to formulate policies to ameliorate these impacts. There is need for tailored policies to the specific locations, downgraded to the specific circumstances of the regional areas of the islands. There is need to build social capital like we have done in Soc Impact that has demonstrated that it's need to involve stakeholders and decision makers so that to raise awareness and thought to move social and policy change. There are important values, social values, environmental values that have more macro consequences throughout the economy and the society. And this is something that we have shown and demonstrated clearly. And identification of how we can change these values, we can anticipate the potential damages to these values is very important in order to minimize these impacts. It's real that the natural capital is being degraded across society, and this has costs for all of us. So we have to project for the future. This project wants to project the future, and this is not only the climate that we have to project, but also the involvement of all society to move society towards a social change that changes behavior and policy. So that is why this declaration is our first step towards next conferences involving stakeholders and also all the islands, making a larger network of collaboration, of sharing information, sharing experiences and knowledge in order to move all together for solutions. So we have to motivate the future. The future is here with us. The climate change is a real thing, and there is not too much time to anticipate these changes. What we have demonstrated is that it is more efficient to act now than to wait for that these impacts come over societies to a large cost and damages. So there is need for a transformation of the global economy and to translate this to policy. From our side, we are working hard to build a network of collaboration with other bodies and institutions which have been working very successfully in the islands and societies and in marine environments. We are trying to collaborate with the Conference of the Peripheral Maritime Regions, CPMR, also with the project NESOI for Danish solutions for optimize for islands on European Islands Facility, and also with our project, Sister Project Coach, also on the evaluation on the macro impacts of values and changes and the co-participation in the design of policies and involving these values in a social chain. We also have a collaboration attended with the Clean Energy for the UN Secretariat, Island Secretariat, and with the Union of the Mediterranean. And also we have a number of projects going on in the outermost regions and in the Canary Islands and also around Europe on climate change and trying to formulate more efficient and innovative policies. Let me finish with a special thanks to the European Commission for founding this project and to our project advisors, Ms. Galère Lebouler and Thomas Bisikas. Also to our experts reviewers, Professor Jürgen Krupp and Dr. Alessandra Goria. Also to our advisory board of Soc Impact, Professor Anil Makandia, Dr. Peggy Graffi, Dr. Juan Carlos Ciscar, Dr. Walter Lear, and Dr. Mark Civics. Also participants in this event from the DG Mare, Mr. Christos Economou, and from the DG Climate, Mr. Manuel Carmona. Also from the Ministry of the Canary Islands, Ecological Transition, José Antonio Balbuena, and for the Ministry of Tourism, Ms. Teresa Berastegui. Also, our rector also has supported this project, participating in this conference. Institutional representatives who have made this also a success, Mr. Francisco Santos for the United Nations Development Programme, Mr. Eduardo Santander from the European Travel Commission, Mr. Tim Faithful from the European Travel Association, Mr. Alejandro Cardenete from the Network European Regions for Sustainable Competitive Tourism, Mr. Francesco Cazze from the Conference of Peripheral Maritime Regions, Mr. Isidro Gonzalez from the Union for the Mediterranean, Mr. Gian Cornielli from Clean Energy for EU Island Secretariat, Ms. Ulrike Lehr from the IRENA, International Renewable Energy Agency. She was also a researcher in this, leading researcher in this project. Also to Mr. Javier Ojeda from the Spanish Professional Aquaculture Association. But last but not least, I would like to thank our human capital in this project, the Soc Impact Steering Committee, these champions in these fields that have worked together to put all this information to come through for integrated solutions, interdisciplinary work. To my co-coordinator, Dr. Guylain Dugo, also to Dr. Gianmarina Maria Sanino from Enea, Italy, Dr. Mattias Gonzalez, Soy Brontisi, Ugo Costa, and for creativity, also working on the communication issues. And of course, to the project office team, Ms. Lucie Milsen, Marcelo Mautone, and Jen Lam, Carmen Garcia Galindo, Elodie Bridge, Pichi, Aledrin Gauchi, Laura Gaspar, and Desidea Arencibia. Of course, more than 120 researchers that have collaborated skillfully in this project, and to whom we are very much in debt and thankful for the work, and to all the more than 2,000 stakeholders in all island focal points in the 12 archipelagos, which who are also contributed very much to the achievements that we have led in this project. So thank you very much to all of you. You are a great human capital, and I wish you the best, good health, and good progress in your lives in the future, and the best for all your islands. Thank you very much.
And that concludes our presentation for today, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of everyone at Soc Impact, we would like to thank all of our speakers and participants for taking the time to be part of our event, and we hope this is the first of many future collaborations. Thank you, and please stay well and healthy. Till next time, goodbye.